This is Unit 2, Chapter 4, Lesson 4, Adding and Subtracting Unlike Fractions. Here's Mrs. Purdue.
Hi, I'm Mrs. Purdue. I'm going to teach you today on adding and subtracting unlike fractions. In this lesson, you are going to say, I can add and subtract unlike fractions. By the end of the unit, you will have these target problems to do. These will be posted at the end of the video, so therefore you can write them down at that time. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to add and subtract unlike fractions. Before you can add, you have to get what we call a common denominator. So we're going to look at these two fractions, 1/2 and 4/5, and we're going to rewrite them so we can rename them as equivalent fractions with the same denominator. So we're going to look at our denominators of 2 and 5. What is a common denominator? 10. So I'm going to rewrite equivalent fractions using the denominator of 10. So to go from 2 to 10, I had to multiply by 5. Because I multiplied by 5 here, I have to do the exact same at the top. 1 times 5 is 5. This 5/10 is equivalent to 1/2. I have to do the same thing down here because I need to make 4/5 a common denominator of 10. So I multiplied 5 times 2 to get to 10, so I have to multiply 4 times 2 to get to 8. My equivalent fractions then would be 5/10 and 8/10. I'm going to add these fractions to show you how we can take the equivalent fractions and add them now that they have a common denominator. So I'm going to rewrite this as 5/10 plus 8/10. Now in the previous video, Mr. Romanovich said you can take your numerators and actually rewrite it over one denominator. So this reads as 5/10 plus 8/10. Now you can add your numerators together and you would end up with 13/10. You obviously have to simplify 13/10. So 10 can go into 13 one time. There are 3 left over and 10 stays your denominator. So if I would add 1/2 and 4/5, I would end up with 1 and 3/10. Let's try some examples. Example number 1, we have 9/10 plus -1/2. Now remember, before we can add these fractions, we have to get a common denominator. So I'm going to rewrite this as 9/10 and -1/2. One strategy you might want to use is take your negative and keep it in your numerator, only so you don't forget about it. That's the only reason why I'm putting it in the numerator. Common denominator between 10 and 2 is 10. Because this is already 10, I don't have to change it. So I'm going to keep this 9/10. -1/2, I need to make this a denominator of 10. To get there, I have to multiply this by 5, so I need to multiply my numerator by 5. Now remember, there's a negative here, so -1 times 5 gives me -5/10. Now I can rewrite my addition problem using a common denominator, which is 10. So I'm going to rewrite my addition problem as 9/10 plus -5/10. Now remember, we can combine our numerators because now they have the same denominator, so we can rewrite this as 9 plus -5 all over 10. And we have to apply our addition rules for integers. We have a positive and we have a negative. So when that happens, we really have to subtract. So this would give me 4/10. Now I need to take my answer and I have to simplify 4/10 down to 2/5. I divided them both by 2 in order to get the the fraction in smallest terms. Example number 2. We have -5/6 minus 4/9. We have to apply our addition rules. The first thing we have to do is get a common denominator. So I'm going to take -5/6 and -4/9, and I'm going to rewrite these so they have a common denominator. Remember, you can add the opposite here in order to make this -4/9. So you have to use your additive inverse in order to get there. Common denominator for 6 and 9 is 18. Now remember, if you can't figure out 18, you can always multiply these together. However, you're just going to be working with bigger numbers. Therefore, so let's take 5/6 and 4/9, and we need to make it so that 18 is our common denominator. In order to get from 6 to 18, we need to multiply this by 3. So we need to do the exact same to the numerator. So -5 times 3 would give me -15. You have to do the same for this fraction down here because you need a common denominator. So 9 times 2 gives you 18, so you have to do the exact same to the top. -4 times 2, which gives you -8. Now I can take this and rewrite these fractions using a common denominator of 18. So I'm going to take -15/18, and I'm going to add -8/18. Now notice what I did here is I combined my numerators so that they are all on the numerator up here, and they have a common denominator of 18. Now I can add. Because they have the same sign, all I have to do is add and keep the sign. So -15 plus -8 gives me -23 all over 18. This needs to be simplified. So what you're going to do is, you know that it has to be negative, so we're going to put the negative here. And you can go through and simplify this like you would without the negative. How many times can 18 go into 23? 1 time. So that's going to be our whole number. There are 5 left over, and then 18 stays our denominator. Therefore, when we finish this problem, we would have -1 and 5/18. This is in simplest form, so I know that I am done. So let's see if you can try your target problems. The first target problem is right here, 7/8 plus 3/11 plus 1/8. And number 2 is 3/8 minus -1/4.